Hello, Year 5. I'm going to do a reading lesson with you now. What we'll actually do today is we are going to read through a text and answer just a couple of questions today. And then tomorrow there are a lot more questions that we're going to answer in quite a lot of detail. And I'm going to go through those questions with you and show you how you can answer them. So for today, I just want you to read the text along with me. So here's just a little introduction to the story, and I'm wondering how long it will take you to see if you can recognise what this story is, because I'm sure it's a story you all know, maybe not as a book, but I'm sure it's one you all know. So the introduction is this: the cyclone. The cyclone. This is an extract from the beginning of a story about a girl called Dorothy. It is set in the prairies of Kansas in America. Prairies are large grassy lands that often have long periods of drought and occasionally violent storms. Now I wonder if you know what story this is yet. Let's read on and see if you can find out. So that's the introduction. We're going to read the text now. Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies with Uncle Henry, who was a farmer, and Aunt Em. Have you worked out what it is yet? Their house was small. There were 4 walls, a floor, and a roof, which made one room. That sounds like a very small house to me. A small hole was dug in the ground called a cyclone cellar, where the family could go in case one of those great whirlwinds arose, mighty enough to crush any buildings in its path. It was reached by a trap door in the middle of the floor, from which a ladder led down into the small dark hole. And here's a picture of Dorothy, Uncle Henry, Aunt Em, and we haven't been introduced to this character yet. I wonder if you can guess his name. When Dorothy stood in the doorway and looked around, she could see nothing but the great grey prairie on every side. Not a tree or a house broke the broad sweep of flat country that reached the edge of the sky in all directions. The sun had baked the ploughed land into a grey mass. Even the grass was not green, for the sun had burned the top of the long blades until they were the same grey colour to be seen everywhere. That word grey has been used a lot, hasn't it? I wonder if that's on purpose. Once the house had been painted, but the sun blistered the paint and the rains washed it away, and now the house was as dull and grey as everything else. When Aunt Em came there to live, she was young and pretty. The sun and wind had changed her too. They had taken the sparkle from her eyes and left them a sober grey. They had taken the red from her cheeks and lips, and they were grey also. She was thin and gaunt and never smiled now. Now I am convinced that the author has used that word grey that many times on purpose. I think he's really trying to make us realise how grey it is, and grey is such a boring colour, isn't it? I think he's done that on purpose. The word gaunt means sort of drawn in, like when you haven't eaten for a while and your face gets sort of sunken. So gaunt is not a nice word, it's a very negative word. Uncle Henry never laughed. He worked hard from morning till night and did not know what joy was. He was grey also, from his long beard to his rough boots, and he looked stern and solemn and rarely spoke. Solemn means serious. It was Toto that made Dorothy laugh and saved her from growing as grey as her other surroundings. Toto was not grey. He was a little black dog with long silky hair and small black eyes that twinkled merrily on either side of his funny nose. Toto played all day long, and Dorothy played with him. And loved him dearly. Today, however, they were not playing. Uncle Henry sat upon the doorstep and looked anxiously at the sky, which was even greyer than usual. Dorothy stood in the door with Toto in her arms and looked up at the sky too. Auntie M, and that's hidden behind the picture of me, but it says Auntie M was washing the dishes. So now we know the name of the dog as well. We know all the characters' names, and I bet you know the story now. From the far north they heard a low wail of the wind and could see where the long grass bowed in the waves before the coming storm. There now came a sharp whistling in the air from the south, and they saw ripples in the grass coming from that direction also. Suddenly Uncle Henry stood up. "There's a cyclone coming, Em," he called to his wife. "I'll go and look after the stock." Then he ran towards the sheds where the cows and horses were kept. Aunt Em dropped her work and came to the door. One glance told her of the danger close at hand. "Quick, Dorothy!" she screamed. "Run for the cellar!" Toto jumped out of Dorothy's arms and hid under the bed, and the girls started to get him. Aunt Em, badly frightened, threw open the trapdoor in the floor and climbed down the ladder into the small dark hole. Dorothy caught Toto at last and started to follow her aunt. When she was halfway across the room, there came a great shriek from the wind, and the house shook so hard that she lost her footing and sat down suddenly upon the floor. Then a strange thing happened. The house whirled around 2 or 3 times and rose slowly through the air. Dorothy felt as if she were going up in a balloon. How odd. The north and south winds met where the house stood and raised it up higher and higher until it was at the very top of the cyclone, and there it remained and was carried miles and miles away as easily as you could carry a feather. It was very dark, and the wind howled horribly around her, but Dorothy found she was riding quite easily. After the first few whirls around, she felt as if she were being rocked gently, like a baby in a cradle. I love how they've used howled horribly there. Can you remember what that's called? Alliteration. Toto did not like it. He ran about the room, now here, now there, barking loudly. But Dorothy sat quite still on the floor and waited to see what would happen. She seems very calm about everything. Once Toto got too near the open trapdoor and fell in. The little girl thought she had lost him, but the strong pressure of the air was keeping him up so that he could not fall. She crept to the hole, caught Toto by the ear, and dragged him into the room again, afterwards closing the trapdoor so that no more accidents could happen. Hour after hour passed, and slowly Dorothy got over her fright. But she felt quite lonely, and the wind shrieked loudly all about her. At first she had wondered if she would be dashed to pieces when the house fell again. But as the hours passed and nothing terrible happened, she stopped worrying and resolved to wait calmly and see what the future would bring. At last she crawled over the swaying floor to her bed and lay down upon it, and Toto followed and lay down beside her. In spite of the swaying of the house and the wailing of the wind, Dorothy soon closed her eyes and fell fast asleep. Okay, can you remember what story that was from? You've probably seen the film, though I don't think any of you would have read the book. It was The Wizard of Oz. Well done if you got that. Now, tomorrow we're going to have a look at some deeper questions about this text. But today we're just going to do a couple just to warm ourselves up. So, some things that you're going to you need to remember when you answer questions, and I will remind you of these tomorrow. First of all, I say this all the time, it's not a memory test. You can go back and look at that video, or look at that text, sorry, as many times as you want to, and we encourage you to. They are not asking you to make up your own words. Use obvious answers. So if they ask you for a word that describes something and it's in the text, use the word from the text. If they ask you how somebody feels and it tells you in the text, use the word from the text. Don't make up your own words. This isn't the time for creative writing. This is the time to write the obvious answers. Try and give reasons or back up your answer with evidence from the text. And this one's really important, and this is the one where people really sort of lose out. If the question is worth 3 marks, you need to write about 3 things. So if there's worth 3 marks available for a question, you've got to write about one thing, then another thing, then another thing. That's the only way you'll get 3 marks. If a question's worth 2 marks, you've got to write about 2 different things. So a lot of people have a question that's worth 3 marks and they write one line along the top, and there's no way that will get them the 3 marks, because you have to write about the number of things that the points are worth, that the marks are worth. So you really bear that in mind. We'll have a look at that tomorrow. But let's have some easier questions to start us off. So this question, looking at our vipers, is an inference question. We're going to infer. Choose the best word or group of words to fit the passage. So here's a passage, and we've got to choose a word to go with it. Dorothy and her family lived on the Kansas prairies. Life there was very. Now I can go back, and in this video, in this case, I can scroll back and have a look at that section. Tomorrow, I will give you the sections again to look at. But I'm just going to think for the moment. Well, it definitely wasn't exciting, because if you remember, the author deliberately used that word grey over and over and over again. So it definitely wasn't an exciting place to live. It didn't really mention being dirty. It spoke about it being run down and the paint peeling off, but it didn't mention dirt. So I'm not sure I'm going to go with dirt. Cold. Well, no, because although we have the storms and the wind, it also said that the sun baked the land and turned it dry, and there were droughts. So I think it's hot there a lot of the time, actually. Now, dreary, that's a word that I need to know what it means. And if I'm not sure, I could look it up in a dictionary. So I'm going to check that, and I've got my iPad right here, and I'm going to check the definition of dreary. So just in case I'm not sure, I'll look up dreary and definition. And of course, a dictionary would be an even better way to do this. Dreary meaning, there we go. And it says here, feeling, displaying or reflecting listlessness or discouragement. Now, listlessness is tiredness. And it gives me an example here. Gloomy, dismal, a cold, dreary morning. What is a dreary mood? Unhappiness, sad, not warm or cheerful. Now that sounds how they described it. Not warm or cheerful, and it means warm as in a warm feeling rather than the temperature. And they kept describing it as grey, and tired and boring. So I think dreary is probably the right answer here. So I think I would go for dreary. Let's have a look if we've got that right. Yes, we did. Brilliant. Well done, guys, if you said that with me. Okay, let's have a look at the next question. This is still inferring. Choose the best word or group of words to fit the passage. Aunt Em and Uncle Henry seemed angry and aggressive, tired and worn out, full of hope, happy and lively. Well, they weren't happy and lively because they were described as grey over and over again, and full of hope. It said it sucked the life out of them. That doesn't sound very hopeful to me. I don't think they were angry or aggressive. They didn't shout at Dorothy or get cross with her. But tired and worn out sounds about right because of that greyness that they kept describing. So I think I'll go with tired and worn out. Let's see if I got that right. Yes, brilliant. Well done if you got that with me. Okay, the last of these types of questions, inference again. Choose the best word or group of words to fit the passage. But Dorothy was... Oh, have you noticed it's the same options we had last time? So was Dorothy angry and aggressive? I don't think she was angry or aggressive. She didn't shout at them. Tired and worn out. Well, Dorothy didn't seem tired. She wanted more life to have. She wanted more life. She wanted more fun. She played with Toto a lot, didn't she? So I don't think she was tired and worn out, even though her family were. Full of hope. Maybe. She doesn't really talk about being hopeful. Happy and lively. Well, Dorothy played with Toto a lot, and I think that made her happy and lively. So I think in this occasion I'm going to say happy and lively, because I think her playing with Toto is what made her happy and lively. Let's see if we got it right. Yes, well done if you got that one. Okay, find and copy one phrase that shows there were no other people living nearby. Now this is where you have to go back, because if you look here at the words I have made in bold, find and copy. Find and copy. Now, a lot of children make this up and make up their own words. You must not do that. If it says find and copy, copy it. One phrase. There might be more than one, but we only need one. So here I've given us an extract. So we need to know that there were no other people living nearby. Have a look through this extract. I'll read it to you and see if you can work out what any of those words are. Okay. When Dorothy stood in the doorway and looked around, she could see nothing but the great grey prairie on either side. Not a tree or a house broke the broad sweep flat of country that reached the edge of the sky in all directions. The sun had baked the ploughed land into a grey mass. Even the grass was not green, for the sun had burned the tops of the long blades until they were the same grey colour. This part is more about colour than people living, so I think we might have already found the bits we need. Once the house had been painted, but the sun blistered the paint and the rains washed it away, and now the house was dull and grey as everything else. I think we're near the beginning of this. Have a look and see if you can find anything that says there were no people living nearby. And remember, we've got to copy it. Okay. Dorothy looked around. She could see nothing. Now, if she had other people living nearby, she'd be able to see something, wouldn't she? But if she couldn't see anything, there must have been nothing near her. So I'm wondering whether that could be a phrase. She could see nothing. That shows us there was nothing near her, nobody near her, no other houses. But the great grey prairie on either side. Again, the great grey prairie on either side. That's all that's there. Nothing but the great grey prairie. Not a tree or a house broke the broad sweep flat of land. So there were no trees or houses. I think those phrases, we don't need whole sentences, just phrases, that's all it asks for, could be the ones that show us that nothing is living nearby. Everything else is about colour. So if you look, she could see nothing. She'd be able to see things, wouldn't she, if there was something there? And there'd be trees and houses, and it says there, not a tree or a house. Let's have a look and see if we got that right. Perfect. Well done. And that's actually all you need to write. Could see nothing and not a tree or a house. If you wrote a bit more than that, that's okay. But if you wrote too much more, it wouldn't be okay, because it's only asking for phrases. And some people might write a whole sentence to hope they get the right bit. They won't accept that. You've got to put here, she could see nothing but the great grey prairie. That's the most you could write. Not a tree or a house broke the broad sweep of flat country. That's all you could write. If you wrote any more, they might just think that you're guessing at a sentence to hope you get it right. So that's all you need. Okay, tomorrow we're going to go through some more questions about this, and some deeper questions, some longer questions. So tomorrow I want you to really come with your thinking hats on, and we're going to look really deeply into our Vipers questions to see what some of our answers could be. And we're going to talk about what we need to write if a question is worth more than 1 mark. Okay, so I will see you tomorrow. That's your reading done for today, because we've read the text of The Wizard of Oz, the beginning of The Wizard of Oz, and tomorrow we will do some more deeper questions. So I will see you on another PowerPoint like this tomorrow.